My mom let my stepsister move into my house without my permission while I was away. Now they're on probation, and I've cut ties for good. A year after the divorce, Mom, 59F, met my now stepfather, 57M, and everything changed drastically. One morning, she was so excited that she virtually floated home. She declared, "I'd met someone special," during breakfast. "He has a daughter in college. Wouldn't it be nice to have a sister?" My stepfather and his daughter, 21F, came into our home after they were married in a matter of months. Everything began to come apart at that point. When grown-ups were present, my stepsister might have looked like an angel in her expensive clothing, but when they weren't, she was someone else. Little things were the first. The laundry would destroy my preferred work outfits. Coffee stains would inexplicably appear on important documents. My personal belongings would disappear and then reappear damaged. Even worse was my stepfather, who was often making disparaging comments about my lifestyle, appearance, and professional choices. "Don't you think that skirt's a bit short for the office?" he'd respond, or, "Maybe if you spent less time on your phone and more time networking, you'd have a better position by now." I attempted to discuss these experiences with Mom, but she consistently dismissed my worries. She'd remark, "He's just being protective. He wants what's best for you." Over time, everything became too much to handle. I had spent weeks honing every element of a pivotal presentation while staying late at work. When I arrived home early one evening, I discovered my stepsister purposely destroying my presentation materials in my room. She had ruined my work with markers, leaving her hands smeared with ink. Things became heated when I confronted her and presented Mom and my stepfather with the evidence. The worst part? My stepfather accused me of mistreating his precious daughter and called me a stupid. As if I were the one causing the trouble, Mom simply sat there and shook her head at me. I had trouble sleeping that night. I had made up my mind by dawn. Dad arrived to fetch me up 20 minutes after I called him. Mom came out to object as I was packing my things into his truck. She remarked, "You're overreacting? Why can't you just try to get along?" I looked over at her. "Your husband called me a fool, and you sat there silently. Your stepdaughter destroyed my work, and you did nothing. That's not overreacting, that's self-preservation." When Dad heard this, he went up to my stepfather. Security had to step in before things were physical since it heated up so quickly. It was like inhaling fresh air after being submerged when I finally moved in with Dad. It's time to stop being cautious. No more looking for sabotage in my room. A few days later, I received a note from Mom. "I can't believe you set your father against my husband like this. You're tearing this family apart." I didn't answer. Which family was she referring to? The one where I was verbally abused by her husband? Where did her stepdaughter ruin my belongings? I concentrated on my work and saving money rather than obsessing over it. I brought meals from home, while my coworkers went out for fancy lunches. I stayed late and took on more work when others went out to bars after work. I contribute a sizable amount of my monthly salary to my future home fund. I eventually purchased a home with 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, a kitchen with granite countertops, and a backyard where I could grow a garden after 3 years of diligent saving. It was all mine, purchased with my own funds after years of diligent effort and cautious saving. I made the decision to throw a housewarming celebration, and I made it clear that Mom could attend. But not my stepsister or stepfather. She concurred. On the day of the party, however, they were all present when I opened the door. "Surprise," Mom whispered feebly, observing my face. As soon as he saw the hardwood flooring and crown molding, my stepfather began to critique everything, his lips quivering. His statement, "It's nice," sounded anything but. With her nose in the air, my stepsister walked around teasingly about how little the kitchen was and how she would purchase a larger home with a swimming pool. I was done. "Really? That's interesting. What job are you planning to buy it with?" She flushed. "I have prospects." When I said, "Prospects aren't paychecks. Last I heard, you were still living off your dad's credit card." My stepfather took a menacing stride forward as his face grew scarlet with anger. Mom gave me a pitying glance over her shoulder as she swiftly escorted them out after grabbing his arm. I was trembling with rage as they went, but I also felt oddly relieved. At last, I had confronted them, in my own house, according to my own rules. My true friends joined me in celebrating my accomplishment as the celebration went on. I had assumed that would be the end of it, but I had no idea that things would grow much worse. I have to go to work now, so I'll update this post tomorrow with what transpired. Is it wrong of me to confront them? In my opinion, they showed up to disparage all I've worked so hard for even though they weren't invited. First update? Since then, a lot has transpired, and I feel uneasy about my present circumstances. I had an opportunity when my supervisor called me into his office 3 months after the housewarming catastrophe. For a 2-week absence, our organization needed someone to manage a significant project at another branch. My house, especially my indoor garden, was my biggest worry, though it was a fantastic opportunity for my job. Delicate orchids, temperamental peace lilies, and my pride and joy, a rare bird of paradise that had just begun to flower, were among the many plants I had grown during the previous few months. I couldn't stomach the idea of going back to dead plants, and each one required a different kind of care. I swallowed my pride and drove to Mom's house after weighing my options. I knew she had a green thumb, but we hadn't talked much since the housewarming incident. In addition, I believed that this might be an opportunity to mend our relationship, just Mom and me, without the involvement of my stepsister or stepfather. When I showed up at her house, she appeared astonished. "Is everything all right?" She ushered me into the kitchen and asked. I asked if she could take care of my house, especially the plants, and explained about the business trip. I should have known something was wrong because of the way her face lit up. "Obviously, with nearly too much enthusiasm," she said. "You are aware of my passion for gardening." I gave her the extra keys and thorough instructions on how to take care of each plant. She tucked the papers away after giving them a fleeting glance. She said, "Don't worry about anything. Simply concentrate on your work. Everything will be well taken care of by me." I dismissed it as my own paranoia, but there was something strange about her actions. What could go wrong after all? I thought she was just observing my plants. I told her my itinerary and emergency contacts before I left. I reminded her that I would be gone for 2 weeks. According to the schedule I jotted down, the plants just require water. Please don't invite anyone over or adjust anything. Although she gave a nod, I couldn't exactly read her face. Obviously, honey, everything will be all right. The fact that she had consented so fast in spite of our previous arguments, that she had hardly looked at the care instructions, and that she kept saying, "Everything will be fine," without addressing the plants directly, were all small details that I began to notice while I was driving home. That night, I double-checked every item in my home. Just in case, I snapped pictures of every room in my house. Despite feeling bad about not trusting my own mother, I even put a tiny security camera in my living room. I noticed Mom's car go by my street the following morning as I was packing my bags to go to the airport. She drove by carefully, as if she was checking something, without stopping or waving. She said she was merely running errands in the area when I later called her about it. I'm now writing this from my downtown hotel room. Even if the project is going well, I still feel nervous. Mom's behavior during our check-in calls has been odd. No matter what time of day I call, she always appears to be at my house. I hear strange background noises, such as TV sounds and clinking plates, which shouldn't be present if she's just dropping over to water some plants. She immediately shifted the topic when I inquired about my bird of paradise. "Everything is all right, try not to worry too much. Simply concentrate on your work." I tried to view the stream from my security camera, but it appears to have been disconnected. While watering plants, Mom says she unintentionally knocked out the cord and was unable to figure out how to plug it back in. Tonight, I spoke with Dad over the phone about my worries. He believes I'm being overly suspicious, but he also brought up Mom's behavior at the housewarming celebration. "My dear," he replied, "keep your eyes wide open. Have faith in your instincts. Even though I still have a week left, I'm thinking of shortening my trip." Am I going overboard? I simply hope I'm mistaken about everything right now. Second update, well, that was far worse than I had anticipated. Things started to get pretty strange during my second week here, with excuses like, "in the middle of something," or "can't talk right now, everything's fine." My mom stopped returning my calls on a daily basis and instead started texting me back. I heard several people in the background when she finally picked up, including what sounded strangely like my stepsister's chuckle. The social media posts followed. Since I have blocked my stepsister, I don't typically check her accounts, but I received screenshots from a coworker who follows her. Selfies that she posted from what was obviously my kitchen were there. One caption said, "I love my new granite countertops." She was seen relaxing on my couch, and another, "Watch Netflix while relaxing in my new living room." I was feeling nauseous. She had been posting these for days, according to the timestamps. She responded with heart emojis and the following when her pals inquired about her new location. I finally found my ideal home. I tried contacting Mom again right away. Directly to voicemail, I dialed the phone of my stepfather. Blocked. Even my stepsister blocked me when I attempted to phone her. I called my neighbor next door in a desperate attempt to get help. She hesitated before answering, "Oh yes. Over the past week, I've observed your sister moving things. I assumed you were aware. According to your mother, you were allowing her to stay while she recovered." I could hardly hold the phone because my hands were shaking so much. Dad was furious when I called him. "Take the next flight back home," he said. "I'll see you over there." I was able to reserve a red-eye flight, which landed shortly after midnight. The first thing I noticed when the Uber dropped me off at my house, the house I had worked so hard to purchase, was that all of the drapes had been altered. I could see strange decorations and furniture through the windows. I tried my key in the lock with shaking hands. It refused to turn. I made another attempt, this time with more caution. Nothing. Suddenly, the key that had suited my own house perfectly no longer did. At that moment, I heard footsteps strolling around my house as if they were supposed to be there. The door opened before I could call 911, and my stepsister appeared, dressed in pajamas as if she owned the house. She dared to appear irritated at my presence, and her blonde hair was in an untidy bun. "Why are you in this place?" My brain was having trouble processing what I was witnessing, so I said the words in a whisper. "Obviously, living here," she grinned. "I've been here for several weeks. While you were off playing businesswoman, Daddy helped me move in." With my suitcase still in hand, I stood there feeling angry. "This is my home. Leave. Right now." She studied her manicured nails while leaning against my doorframe. "Yes, that isn't taking place. I feel very at ease here. By the way, the water pressure in the bathroom is fantastic. Acquire. Outside. Of course, my own home." Every word had enough edge to pierce. In reaction, she slammed the door in my face and laughed, really laughed. The latch clicked, and then I heard her footsteps as she left. With my bags all about me, I stood on my own front porch, shaking with anger. The flower beds I had meticulously arranged were illuminated by the yard lights I had put. I could see my living room through the glass, but it was no longer my living room. She tossed her jacket over my couch. My hardwood floors were littered with her shoes. I took out my phone and dialed Mom, my hands shaking. She sounded sleepy as she heard the third ring. "What's the matter? What's the matter?" I nearly let out a yell. "I just got home to find my stepsister living in my house. She says she's been here for weeks. Tell her to get out right now, or I'm calling the police." "Don't contact the police, please." Mom's voice changed from drowsy to frantic. "We'll be over. Just wait there, please. What other place should I go? I can't get out of my own home." The next half hour was the longest I've ever experienced. I watched the lights in the houses next to mine turn on as I paced back and forth on my front porch. Seeing me out here in the middle of the night, what do they think? A few automobiles passed slowly, perhaps debating whether to make their own police call. At last, Mom's vehicle arrived, driven by my stepfather. Still wearing their jammies beneath their coats, they hurried out. "What's happening?" I confronted Mom and made a demand. "Why is my stepsister in possession of my house keys? Why do you allow her to reside here?" At least Mom had the grace to appear uneasy. She needed a place to stay, honey. She was unable to pay the rent increase when her lease expired. Your home was just sitting there, unoccupied. Just sitting there, vacant? It's my home, you weren't entitled. As if it clarified everything, Mom added. The girl needed somewhere to live. Anyway, your house is too large for one person. I kept my eyes on my mother's face, hoping for some recognition of how totally she had violated my confidence. Rather, she only stood there, offering justifications for the unacceptable. As always when I was younger, my stepfather went forward with his chest puffed out. "Look, telling you about her moving in was pointless, you would have simply refused?" I would have said no, of course. I can't even enter my own home since the locks have been changed. Anyway, they needed to be changed, he replied, dismissively waving his hand. "I was kind to you." I gaped at him in shock. "You know that's against the law, don't you? Changing the locks on someone else's property is not an option." He sneered. "Legal, illegal? It's finished now. This house is too large for just you, and she needs somewhere to stay." I whispered, lowering my voice to a perilous whisper. "Get her out. Get her out of here or I'll call the cops." That recognizable sneer twisted my stepfather's cheeks. "You're not going to do it." Mom moved forward, her hands clenched. "That's it if you call the police. I'll never talk to you again. Do you want it that way? To utterly ruin this family?" I let forth a rough, acrid laugh. "This family? Do you mean the time you allowed your husband to occupy my home without permission? That household?" Rather than answer, they turned and left me there with my bags as they entered my house. With a last click, the door shut behind them. As I took out my phone, my hand stopped shaking. Don't hesitate any longer. No more attempting to maintain harmony. Even though Dad believes I made the correct decision, I can't get Mom's vow to never talk to me again out of my mind. Third update. When I dialed 911, things proceeded swiftly. 2 police cars with bright lights arrived in less than 20 minutes. I told the officers what was going on, and the neighbors were clearly awake now, watching from behind their curtains. Are you the legitimate owner? The officer inquired. Using my phone, I retrieved the property records and screenshots of my stepsister's social media posts demonstrating her move into her new place. I said, yes, I do have all the paperwork. I gave my mother a key so she could water my plants while I was gone on business. Rather, they changed all the locks and moved my stepsister in. The doorbell was rung by the officer. After a long silence, there were shuffles coming from within. The door opened at last. As they stood there, my mother, stepfather, and stepsister made a vain attempt to project confidence. Good evening, said the cop. Everyone inside must provide identification and proof of residency. My stepfather took the stage, speaking in his most convincing business voice. There was a miscommunication. My daughter is permitted to remain here by my stepdaughter. She is attempting to stir trouble after they had a falling out. That is untrue, I interrupted. I never granted authorization. While I was out on business, they exploited me. Inquire about the locks. They will acknowledge that they altered them without telling me. The first thing my stepfather said was, the old locks were defective. You admit that you changed the locks without the homeowner's consent? The officer paused to take notes. My stepsister came forward, dread taking the place of her previous arrogance. Daddy assured me things would be all right. He claimed that after she grew accustomed to the concept, she wouldn't mind. Changing locks on someone else's property and occupying their home without permission constitutes illegal entry, the officer replied, glaring at my stepfather. We will need to request that you and your daughter visit the station. Mom burst into tears. This is simply a family issue, please, we can resolve this. Your husband and stepdaughter have admitted to changing locks and occupying property without the owner's consent, the officer sternly retorted. It is illegal to do so. After that, everything occurred pretty fast. As they escorted my stepsister to the patrol car, she began to cry. For the first time, my stepfather remained silent despite his fury turning his face crimson. As they took her husband and daughter away, Mom shook on the porch. I called an emergency locksmith with the authorities' assistance, and he came an hour later. Mom eventually spoke as he sought to get me back into my own house. How were you able to? She hardly raised her voice above a whisper. How could you harm your own family in this way? Looking at her, this lady who had spent years choosing everyone else over me, I felt oddly at ease. You stated long ago that they were your true family, Mom, I murmured softly. You sat there silently the day she ruined my work presentation. The day you turned away when he called me derogatory names. They treated me like trash every time you told me to be the bigger person. They were the ones you repeatedly selected. They will now have criminal histories, she cried. Was it what you were looking for? I answered, I wanted my mother to protect me. My goal was to feel secure in my own house. The only thing I wanted was for you to pick me. After completing his task, the locksmith gave me the replacement keys. I tested them in the lock as Mom watched. From now on, you are no longer my daughter, she declared, her voice trembling with rage. You have no right to ruin our family in this way. For the last time, I looked at her. The day you decided that your new spouse and his daughter were more significant than your own child, you ruined our family. I just quit allowing you all to mistreat me. She climbed into her vehicle and drove off. I entered my home, my transformed, violated home. All of my lovely plants had died from carelessness. My beloved bird of paradise was also wilted and brown. My stepsister had filled my cabinets with her belongings and reorganized everything in the kitchen. Designer clothes were all over my spare bedroom, which had been transformed into her personal closet. Later that day, the police made a call. They wanted to know whether I would file a complaint. I considered forgiveness, family loyalty, and Mom's tears. Then I recalled being gaslighted, abused, and told to just take it. Yes, I firmly said. I wished to file charges. In a frightening email, my stepfather threatened to sue me for his daughter's psychological suffering. Without replying, I sent it to my attorney. On social media, my stepsister made evasive posts about toxic people who pretend to be victims, but I suppressed her accounts. Over the weekend, I thoroughly cleaned my house to remove any evidence of their presence. I started over after discarding the dead plants. I installed better cameras and changed all the security codes with the help of Dad and his girlfriend. Mom sent one last text last night, saying, "I hope you're happy with what you've done. I blocked her number since you've ruined everything." Fourth update. A lot has transpired since my last update, which was a few months ago. The court case proceeded more quickly than anticipated. Rather than risk a trial, both my stepsister and my stepfather accepted plea agreements. They were both placed on probation and mandated to reimburse me for the expense of replacing the locks and for the damage they caused to my residence. Above all, they have a legal obligation to avoid my property. In court, my stepsister attempted to play the victim by claiming that she was only doing what her father had told her to do and was unaware that it was against the law. The judge was unimpressed, particularly after seeing her boastful social media posts about her new house. Until the very end, my stepfather remained haughty, accusing his lawyer of being spiteful and disrespectful. Mom attended the court sessions, but she sat beside them. She never gave me a glance. She made an attempt to approach me in the parking lot following the sentencing. "Are you happy now?" she inquired. "Your stepsister has a criminal record because of you. Is this retaliation?" I felt nothing except sympathy when I looked at her, actually looked at her. "Mom, this is not retaliation. This is the result. They moved in without my consent after breaking into my house and changing my locks. How could that be acceptable?" As usual, Mom said she needed a place to stay. I answered, "Then you ought to have allowed her to remain with you. Or assisted her in locating a residence of her own. You decided to steal mine instead." As she normally does when she loses an argument, she breaks down in tears. "You have my undying forgiveness for this. This family has been ripped apart by you." I maintain my composure. "No, Mother. When you decided that their enjoyment was more important than my well-being years ago, you tore this family apart. I'm just at last advocating for myself. I ran into my aunt at the grocery store last week. She made an effort to guilt-trip me by claiming that Mom was having trouble adjusting to our distance from one another and that I ought to try to make amends. I informed her that some bridges must remain burned. I'm getting better sleep now. The more time passes, the less I anxiously check my phone for alerts from my new security system. The sunlight coming through my windows is helping my new plants grow. I'm going to see Dad and his girlfriend next month, and they call frequently. Out of habit, I occasionally find myself reaching for the phone to contact Mom, but the temptation is quickly squelched when I recall that night on my doorstep when I was locked out of my own house. My mother passed away years ago when she decided to prioritize her new family over me, so losing her isn't the worst part. Accepting that she will never comprehend what she did wrong is the most difficult aspect. In his last threatening email, my stepfather discussed family loyalty and how I had betrayed them through his attorney. One word was my lawyer's response. Family loyalty should have started with respecting my client's property rights. I've changed my phone number, installed cameras throughout my house, and blocked them on all platforms. This may seem extreme to others, but I'm not taking any chances in light of what they did. I've decided to sever all communication with them. Life continues. Last week, I received a promotion at work. The plants they killed are being replaced by new ones, and my garden is growing again. I recently started seeing someone who respects my limits and is aware of my trust concerns. There are some bridges that must remain burned. Sometimes severing links is the only healthy option, not just a choice. This is going to be my last update on the matter. It's time to put this chapter behind me and concentrate on starting a new life. A life free of poisonous relatives. Without being overly cautious. Without sacrificing my personal limits for those who have never honored them. I am at liberty.